Hi everyone. So we are live with the second panel, and we have Ajay who will be moderating the session. Over to you, Ajay.
Thanks, Ganesh. So, hi everyone. Good afternoon once again. We have a wonderful set of panelists with us for this second session, which is about going global or staying local and decoding business in the post COVID 19 environment. So, beginning the session, I spoke about the program and the partners that we have. We are lucky to have all three of our partners from the program to be here as fellow panelists. We have Lakshmi Potluri, who is the CEO of DCF Ventures. We have Katiana Kamin, who is the venture partner for Mest Africa. And we have Virginia Tan, founding partner of Teja Ventures. So, just to set the context, while COVID 19 has introduced new challenges and the business environment, the business economies have called in for measured, practical, and informed approaches, both from the political quarters coming in from government and business leaders, we also need to realize that the current situation is not just for today or the immediate future, but it is likely to lead us into a new normal. And hence, it is important for us to be aware of and be prepared enough to adapt to these shifts and changes. And how do we kind of go about navigating it and building bigger businesses which secure our futures and secure our economies? We as Startup Reserve were fortunate enough to work with a Spanish designing and consulting firm called Nova Ventures a few weeks back. And we actually interviewed about 23 large corporates from Latin America, North America, Europe, South and Southeast Asia to understand and gain their perspectives on innovation, how they're going to spend their budgets, and how it is kind of going to impact their overall startup engagement scenario. While many of them, they were not really sure as to how this is going to kind of pan out, but many of them were on either sides of the middle line. So many of them who wanted to kind of bring down the budgets because they felt that conserving on those is kind of something which is going to help them tide over these times. But many of them felt that it was all the more relevant and important for allocating newer budgets so that they are not only able to survive, but they're able to sustain and probably scale over a period of time. So very divergent kind of perspectives when you talk to corporates about innovation and how they are going to tide over in the new business environment. It all the more becomes important when we talk about startups, and we have three amazing leaders who have been working with founders and entrepreneurs for a fairly long time to give and share their perspectives on how do startups go about decoding this new business environment. And while many of them in the past, while they might be building from a particular country and looking at regional markets or global markets, how do they kind of conserve this, and how do they kind of reimagine their business in these new times? So with that, I'll kind of jump into the session. Request each one of you, starting with Lakshmi, to briefly introduce yourself, what your organization does, and how you work with startups. And then we'll go to Katiana and finally to Virginia. Over to you, Lakshmi.
Thank you, Ajay, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. And very happy to partner with you on such an exciting initiative. My name is Lakshmi Kotluri. To everyone out there, I run a company called DCF Ventures, which is innovation as a services company. We work largely with government entities to help governments promote startups and entrepreneurship. So with that objective, we land up working with a lot of startups and the ecosystem itself. And we work with several governments. We've already worked with Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and we are in discussion with a few other states. We set up incubators, accelerators, and also run them. So in the process of that, we also work with a lot of startups to help nurture the journey of their entrepreneurship. Over to
Thank you. Hello. Thank you as well for having me on this session. Super excited to as well be partnering with you. As my Tiana, I'm currently the head of portfolio at Mest Africa, and there I'm actually managing with a team of venture partners our portfolio with over 35 active portfolio companies all over the continent. So Mest is actually a training program and a seed fund with headquarters in Accra, but several other hubs in the countries of Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, and soon to be Cote d'Ivoire. And what we do is within the training program, every year we invite 60 aspiring entrepreneurs from all over the African continent to Accra to actually join our project-based and fully sponsored training program where they are receiving the skills in the fundamentals of business, finance, communications, as well as technology. And within this project-based program, they are actually developing software and technology solutions that they then pitch after that full year in front of our investment committee in order to receive investment of between $50,000 to $250,000, and then join one of our venture hubs in one of the countries that I have mentioned before in order to receive incubation and full-time support from our venture partner team and the full MEST team as well. So yeah, super happy to be on the panel, and next to Virginia. Thank you.
Virginia, I think you're on mute.
Right, technology for you. Hi, my name is Virginia. Thank you very much, Ajay, for having me on the panel. I am the founding partner of Teja Ventures, and Teja Ventures is the first gender lens VC fund for emerging Asia. We invest across Southeast Asia and India and China as well. Before we built Teja, I actually founded She Loves Tech, which is now the world's largest startup competition for women in technology. We are very happy to say that because of COVID, we're in 30 countries this year, because COVID has actually, in a way, forced us to actually accelerate being online, which ironically is the key to scaling. So, I've been involved in the women's empowerment space for the last 15 years, across the world. Super excited, to talk about what a post-COVID world will look like, because I think from just an investment thesis perspective, we're seeing a lot of very positive things that are actually coming out of COVID.
Thank you, Lakshmi, Katyana, and Virginia. So with that, I'll kind of jump into some of the questions that I thought would be relevant for this panel, and which might be useful for some of our attendees who are building businesses, whether from India or any other part of the world, and looking at or thinking about whether to stay local or going global. So the pace at which the corona crisis has kind of hit us has required many businesses, big and small, and even economies, to be very nimble in their response. And we are at a time where the mantra innovate or die has never been more relevant. And the current crisis, and like it has been highlighted even in the earlier panel, has kind of shown us how important digital capabilities are, and likewise digital products are, and how important is it to have the speed and seamless integration with a focus on continuity, scale, and scope. So whether we talk of work from home, or whether it is businesses which have had to turn from an offline to an online model, unless and until they have already had digital capabilities, or probably they haven't, how and why they need to kind of go about building that and going about addressing business. So given this scenario, how do you place the global versus local kind of a debate for startups, and where and how do you foresee technology playing an important role in catalyzing this opportunity that has been created by the current pandemic? We can go with either of you to start with, and then just follow an order.
So happy to start here. Thank you for that question. I think it's a very interesting one. I'm, of course, going to be talking from the perspective of the African continent, because our startups are active there and we have the most insights from that perspective. So in general, I think we all agree that physical movements are going to be restricted, which forces some companies to have a more locally focused scope. However, on the other hand side, like we have the digital evolution and, like more technology being present in our daily lives and also in our daily day-to-day business. And therefore, I personally think that answering this question will be highly dependent on the nature of every individual business, because every business, has a different business model and a different scope. So therefore, like companies need to ask themselves several questions, I think, which include, like how well do you know the local market that you want to be working in, and how, universal is your product or service, meaning, is it very dependent on market dynamics, or is it very dependent on other factors such as as cultures, and therefore, make your decisions based on that. And as well, like how much physical presence do I need in a certain market? And therefore, like customer behaviors are influenced, and therefore the way that you make decisions are, of course, being influenced as well. But in order to, understand how technology will be like an innovation catalyst, from what I've seen, especially on the African continent, is first of all, technology is like an enabler for different type of industries, such as, agriculture, transportation, just industries that have seen less technology involvement in the past, and therefore enables a lot within these industries. But another important point that I would like to make in terms of, having technology as a catalyst is really about adoption. So just to give you a brief example, within the healthcare sector. So we're now all talking about telemedicine and, having doctors virtual appointments with doctors in order to, reduce the spread of the coronavirus, especially during these times now. And we have been talking about these solutions in the past already, but now due to the situation, we're more or less forced to adopt them, even though we would not have been willing to really adopt these solutions in full. And I think, therefore, technology is playing a big role in terms of, enabling adoption of different products and services, and forcing people to change their perspective and see things differently.
Yeah. Lakshmi, go next.
Yeah, so I was thinking this whole global versus local debate obviously has been happening even prior. Brexit's happened, and we've been talking in the US about the Indian companies taking away jobs. So I think from different countries, this whole global versus local debate is going to be seen differently. If we look at it from an Indian perspective, and especially how startups can take advantage of this, and how can technology act as a catalyst. A lot of growth in office automation tools. I mean, like AirMeet, what we are on, for example, itself, is something we discovered. I'm sure most of us are going to discover tools like this because of COVID and because of the necessity. And companies that are well poised in the office automation space, irrespective of where they are, if they're able to, just simply strengthen their search and search SEO, they could be discovered because people are constantly looking for better office automation tools, and all of this better remote working tools. Anything that can help people work remotely is going to be great for startups. Apart from that, there are a lot of industries, like Tatiana already mentioned. Healthcare has obviously seen a forced adoption, telemedicine and virtual hospitals and all of that. Even hospitals, which have always been resistant to change, and because they saw this as an opportunity, as a cannibalization of their business, always resisted. But now we see hospitals jumping on, wanting to be offering virtual healthcare. I get messages every day from all the leading hospitals saying you can consult the doctor. So that's anyway happening. And I see some changes in the real estate sector as well. So in fact, just yesterday I was talking to a startup which said that, they have this whole AR, VR technology that they implemented for a leading builder. And in the last 2 months, that technology has helped the builder sell 40 units. So this again was something, nobody ever really believed in it. Occasionally a very progressive builder would try it, and it was more vanity. But now I think they're seeing this actually as an application, and they're able to have a revenue model where you say, it's directly proportionate to the sales. So I think real estate is another sector that's going to see a big change, and technology is going to be adopted at multiple levels, because now even with the whole physical distancing and all of that, they'll be forced to bring in some more automation that may, of course, lead to different kind of jobs restructuring. And so I think I'll pause here. And there are a lot more sectors, but I think these two sectors are something. One was already mentioned, so I wanted to talk about real estate a little bit, and then office automation. And so companies that can take advantage of the new needs, whether it's startups or otherwise, especially startups being nimble, there's a huge opportunity to, if you are well equipped, or if you can just make a slight pivot. I think there's a lot to go global right now for Indian startups, especially.
Nice. Virginia, your take on it?
Sure. I share a lot of the same thoughts as the other two speakers, actually. Two main trends which I see emerging, right, which actually overlap with some of the things that they both said. The first thing is that, we talked about in SARS, right? Alibaba caught that wave, right? So that was the main e-commerce wave. What we're seeing is actually new types of business models, even within e-commerce itself. So for example, something I've been giving a lot of thought to is, for example, how badly hit the commercial real estate market is going to be, because, people would just, like, for example, in Singapore, you buy commercial real estate, it's like a sure win thing. You just sit on it in 5 years' time, you make your money. But actually now, for example, in China, something we've noticed, there's like a super unicorn company called Haidilao. It's like a steamboat company. One shop you can make a couple 100 million RMB of revenue per month. And now they're actually worried because they're realizing that the economy's back to normal, but people actually have gotten used to not eating out. So in a case like that, what happens to commercial real estate allocation? So one of the things that I hear a lot of buzz on, a lot of my friends are developers in Singapore, is actually we're starting to see a whole new wave of what I call retail technology emerge. So I'm looking at that a lot, right? Because I look at she economy companies, right? So everything from software for virtual sizing, everything from like live streaming shops, which is companies I've seen in China anyway, to basically, online, offline. So you sort of like, you can go to a pop-up and you can also buy it in an Instagram shop. So, it's like because I think there'll still be footfall, but I think people would want more. They want more curated experiences. Otherwise, why would they bother going to just a mall? So for example, that's one thing. And then if you want to talk about e-commerce specifically, something that I've seen a lot recently is that, from e-commerce, we're turning away a little bit because e-commerce margins are low and overheads are high. And we're seeing this thing called social commerce. I saw this in China take off the last 5 years. Now I'm seeing this take off all across Southeast Asia, including in our portfolio. Because what's very interesting is that social commerce, right? You're changing the distribution of actually how you deliver, the distribution of fulfillment. And actually with e-commerce, it's always just like you just buy it online. Whereas now, what we see is the commerce going to like the agent or the distribution point, and then relying on the agent to either aggregate orders or basically to get it to the final consumer. The second big trend that I see, and I've been speaking a lot about this recently, is actually what was seen as, and I think both speakers have touched upon this, what was seen as socially good, what was seen as like a nice to have, like this is good for society, is now becoming urgent, is actually becoming what we call a core need. So I mean, you talked about telemedicine, you talked about online education, right? So in the past, right, to be very honest, online education was preserved for like like for example STEM technology, right? STEM education, that's for like the wealthy. But actually now what you're seeing is that the Filipino president in the last couple of days said that he's not going to open the schools until a vaccine is found. So what does that mean? Actually, not for the rich, but actually for the miss. So that's accelerating certain trends. But when I look at from the funding side, $12.2 billion this year in the first 4 months went into social impact funds, because and a lot of the things that actually, a lot of the pipeline that Teja is actually looking at, like I said before, it was good, sustainable, impactful, and now it is urgent. Now it's like we actually need to invest in things like that, and when we're seeing, for example, verticals like fintech for the unbanked now very necessary. Apart from education and healthcare, digital supply chain, something that we've been investing in a lot across. We invested in a company in India, one in Indonesia. They're doing very well. They've worked with the government to keep supply chains flowing to small retailers. So that's one shift, which I think is a good shift, post-COVID.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I'll come to our next question. I'm taking two questions, one on the threat side of things and one on the opportunity side of things. I'll go with the threat question first. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we had earlier this month and in April interviewed a whole bunch of multinationals from different regions, and one of the common areas that they spoke about, which has been impacted and where they need to kind of put more thoughts as far as innovation goes or spend more, is on the supply chain side, because globally supply chains have been disrupted with the current situation, and that is something that has led to expecting more localization of supply chains, especially of essentials, and more so for sectors that are seen as strategically important. The risks to supply chain are numerous, and they are continuously evolving. And so from a demand and supply situation standpoint, how would you advise, or what would you advise your startups to safeguard their business, but at the same time also their customers and investors?
Maybe I start. That's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what did they say? Never waste a crisis, right? So every crisis is also an opportunity. I think I definitely see, localization because, like I said, digital supply chains is something that we've been investing in even pre-COVID. But I definitely see because a lot of like I said, shipping and logistics are limited. So we definitely see them selling sort of more local products, and actually, like I said, the government actually even allocating certain amounts of food supplies for these digitalized supply chains to distribute for the downstream. However, and this is something I've been very involved with. For example, we invest in China, India, and Indonesia, right, which is very interesting, like Asia's three largest markets, consumer markets. So China, because they locked down first, they were actually the first to run out of a lot of things, and fresh food, for example, was one of them. So I'll give you a very specific example. One of my portfolio companies is a healthy food company, and one of their core raw materials is actually coconut oil. And actually, to be honest, they literally told me we can't make our food anymore, our snacks, because China has run out of coconut oil, And so one thing that we've done as a fund is actually I've helped them to open up, or sort of, because they can't get it from the core distributors in China. So we've helped them to open up supply chains of coconut oil directly to the producers in Indonesia, in the Philippines, and also in India, in Kerala, actually. So I think yes, supply chains are disrupted, but all the more in times like this, we need to be. In fact, they are actually now using this as an opportunity because they were disrupted. They're now using this as an opportunity to sort of replan their entire supply chain. Previously, they were getting coffee from Colombia, and I said, guys, why are you doing that? Why don't we just get it from Indonesia or India or Sri Lanka? So while it is disruption and while there is more localization, because that's actually what is immediately available, but I think you should take this time to actually think about how you set up a more sustainable long-term plan. And that also means becoming closer to your neighbors in some ways as well.
Yeah, great points. Tatiana?
Yeah, thanks for these great points, Virginia. I totally agree with that. I would love to add onto onto these points, because I think every company in the past, I think the supply chains have become longer and more complex, and people lost a little bit of an oversight of, all the different stakeholders involved in these supply chains. And the only thing I actually would like to add to that is that I recommend companies to better understand their supply chains, from customer, supplier, as well as, investors, everything that is part of them understanding it, and as well, just obtain a complete visibility on all of these points and a better understanding. And a next step would be, to understand the way of collaboration that the different stakeholders within the supply chains could go into, and you as a business as well, what type of communication and collaboration you need to engage with these players within the supply chain in order to as well manage expectations with your customers, with your suppliers, and with investors, so that the process is very transparent. And I think this is especially important based on with the assumption of uncertainty. We have been working a lot with uncertainty in these past couple of months, like what's going to happen next week, what's going to happen tomorrow, like are we still going to be locked down, when are flights going to come back, when are we able to cross the borders, but also what are the time lags that I need to expect from these different suppliers, and what are the time lags that I need to communicate to my customers. So I think that's pretty much crucial in order to making sure that supply and demand is more or less balanced, but of course, making these contingency plans and work with scenario analysis to best prepare for that post-COVID on an ongoing basis.
Lakshmi?
Yeah, so I think a lot of great points raised and mentioned already by Virginia as well as Tatiana. But just to add on to this, obviously, a lot depends on, what's the situation of this lockdown, because people who have already have adjusted by now to a large extent. And there are situations where, you just have to wait for the right product. So there's going to be both situations. Just to add an example, although this is not like essential service, there's a company that's, launched its own brand of sports apparel. And they were importing their fabric from Taiwan, getting the stitching done in Sri Lanka. And, they had no idea what to do if the lockdown extends. And I just got a note a couple of days ago saying that they've now found a completely new fabric, a smart fabric, which they still are exploring as an alternative. But when you are exploring alternatives because of the change in the supply chain that's happened, there's also several repercussions, and to iterate and ensure that you have a very similar customer experience is very crucial. So it's going to be a fine balance. A lot is dependent on how long the situation is going to be uncertain, and what's like Katyana mentioned, a contingency plan has to be in place. But can that be a long-term plan? It's still to be evolved. And there are certain products where for example, in even pharma and all those, you can't simply just find easy alternatives, and there are a lot of repercussions, be it cost or quality or other synergies you have, certifications and so on and so forth. Countries like China, from what I understand, have already started, their supply chain has kick-started. They're already starting to supply to many places where they're already, even Indian manufacturers who are sourcing from China have started getting some of their supplies shipped to their customers. So things will maybe, slowly start getting back on track. At best, I would say this can be seen, of course, as a contingency, putting more checks in place for what can you do to monitor supply chains? How can you plan for any such unexpected situations going forward? Of course, unexpected, you can never, predict. This was completely unpredictable. But what would we do better, if such a situation were to happen? And I think none of us really thought such a situation would happen. But now that it has, I think we'll take this contingency planning far, far more seriously than it ever has. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts that's going to happen because of all this distress that's happened across the supply chain and elsewhere as well.
Nice. So that brings me to the next question, which kind of many of you or all three of you have kind of touched upon. So one was on the threat side of things, where I spoke about the global supply chain getting disrupted. But on the opportunity side, like each one has spoken about the changing environment, it kind of definitely offers unique opportunities for organizations to kind of reinvent themselves. And these are times that bring about disruption and a time to kind of unearth or uncover kind of new growth opportunities, which kind of redefines their future strategy, and it kind of future-proofs their business in the new normal. So, what would your recommendations be for companies which are yet to kind of figure out or still kind of getting their heads around how do we kind of reinvent, or how do we kind of take this situation, which is a negative one, and convert it into something positive for ourselves as a business? So, if you were kind of mentoring, talking to a young company, a first-time entrepreneur, who has kind of come across this situation as an investor, as an organization working closely with entrepreneurs, how would you kind of guide entrepreneurs, founders, companies to kind of tackle the situation and convert it in favor for themselves, rather than being pessimist or looking at it in a negative kind of a connotation?
Ajay, maybe I can share some of my experience in the in recent times. So half of our portfolio actually has raised new rounds during COVID, which is actually very interesting for me, because we obviously we did not expect COVID. Most of my time over the last 2 months has been spent either supporting our portfolio, to close rounds or raise new rounds, or to doing office hours with She Loves Tech, our global finalists from all over the world. So I noticed two things, right? So I think COVID is actually a time, whereby you can see who are the most resilient of entrepreneurs. And actually the types of entrepreneurs that I see being very resilient, are actually, so for example, I'm very happy to share that my entire portfolio, none of all the companies have cash to last this year, which is to me like a bit of a miracle, quite frankly. But what I noticed is that the entrepreneurs who are really leading with purpose, they're building companies not because they thought they can make a quick buck. They're building companies because they believe they can solve problems, and therefore you're committed to the solution regardless of COVID or not. And so the two big trends that I'm seeing in terms of resilience are, one of them is that what they were doing before, like I said, was niche, good, but actually now it's become essential. So they have actually ridden the wave of COVID. So you see that with digital supply chains, especially to what I call the underserved, right? Mom and pop merchants, rural retailers, rural agents. Like for example, when I talk about India, I know a lot of Indian VCs were actually only interested in the urban population, forgetting that India actually is 900 million rural. because they felt that, the LTV of the rural consumer is like negligible. All of a sudden, rural commerce has become like kind of a thing because they were like, people still need to be fed during COVID-19, and then the government is, shutting everybody down. What are we gonna do? We got to depend on these digitalized supply chains. So, one of my startups, actually, they're getting much more investor interest now because of COVID-19. Because they're focused on rural distribution, of white goods, FMCG, energy products, blah blah blah. And what they did, and what we made them do in the last 6 months, actually, before COVID, was that we made them actually digitally enable all of their rural agents who are women, and actually that has allowed them to actually, use this crisis actually to sort of pivot nicely, or to actually, continue operations when everybody else is disrupted. The second type of company of resilience that I see is that, okay, so maybe before COVID, they were thinking about a pivot, but, COVID has actually given them extra incentive to do it. So, they didn't benefit directly from COVID, but actually they are using COVID as an opportunity to pivot. And a company we recently just invested in, when we invested in them, and I think this is relevant for anybody who's doing purely offline businesses. So when we invested in them, they were offline business. And I was like, I don't invest in offline businesses. If there's not a tech element, I'm not going to go in. But what they've done, and I was very, very impressed because their response within like a week or two of COVID, the entire new business strategy rolling out, So what they did is that they were selling plant-based food, but in restaurants. And then they're Indonesia, right? And then they got shut down because everybody shut down. So apart from, we talked even before going to the investment, we talked about how we changed the online to offline sales ratio anyway, because actually that is actually the right strategy. If you look at, there's a company in China called High Tea. Okay, so apart from like Luckin Coffee, which everybody doesn't like anymore, High Tea is like a bubble tea unicorn, right? And what's really interesting about High Tea is that they only have 300 branches, but actually, like the majority, 70-80% of their sales are actually online, making them particularly resilient in this. So actually, what we were talking about to offline businesses is saying, can you actually open less physical branches, but actually change your strategy, especially invest in an online digital strategy such that you maximize the same amount of sales, but actually from the same amount of physical branches. Now that changes your CapEx completely, So maybe you don't open 20 stores this year, maybe open 10, but you still get the same sales. And so the startup started doing that. And then the second thing they did, and they did it so quickly, I was so impressed by them actually, is that they started to sell direct to consumer frozen products. Frozen plant-based products, which they weren't doing before COVID, and just see the sales rise because people wanted to buy and cook it at home now. And I have to tell you, I mean, the team is young, women-led, and I was just so impressed. I felt like, what, we did the right thing. So I would say, one is ride the wave or take the opportunity to do the tough stuff. Yeah.
Lakshmi, want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, this is a forum where we are talking about, promoting and supporting women entrepreneurs. And I think in such situations, women are far more resilient. We are far more innovative. Typically, we know how to make opportunities and find opportunities in difficult situations. So I think women have these traits naturally inherent and going for them. That said, if there is a company which is in its early stage and either just launched its product and perhaps wasn't COVID ready, that's one situation. Obviously, the first step, for example, like Virginia mentioned, if it was predominantly focused non-digital, you want to check if there are options to go digital. And sometimes, a restaurant, to be honest, cannot necessarily go digital, but there are many businesses perhaps can look at digital options. One example is while a restaurant can't go digital, there is a famous bakery in California which was completely offline, and they actually pivoted their model during COVID, where they just started making bake your own kits because baking kind of suddenly became very, very popular. Everyone was baking more at home. So while it may seem that it's very hard to suddenly pivot, there could be some opportunities which are not so visible, and you could find new ways to find sales. This just happened because they had a lot of inventory and they wanted to figure out how to reduce the inventory, and then they had huge growth. So the first step, of course, is if you have just entered the market, explore if there are any alternatives to be digital directly with your existing product. If your existing product cannot be, targeted on the digital front, then look at alternatives or pivot. And the third one is find synergies. For example, of course, so many companies, I mean, just look at Louis Vuitton now starting to sell masks. So look at, what is the current opportunity? There are companies that are starting to make sanitizers, like there are cosmetic companies even in India which are launched their own herbal sanitizers because they never had a herbal sanitizer in a cosmetic company, but they've started doing that because that's the need of the hour. So explore launching new products, even if it wasn't necessarily what you started off with, because this is also the necessity. So from an impact perspective, you are helping people with what they need. So I think these are the three things we'd first start with. And worst case, if none of the three check the box for you right now, like I said, we have to be more resilient at this point. This is the time when some of the best businesses have come forward. We have the classic example of Airbnb, which most of our audience will be familiar with, that emerged out of this crisis in 2008. Of course, this is a far, far different crisis. But, everyone is positive. Everyone's going to hope that, things will change. Ways and behavior will definitely change, and we'll have to see how that evolves. There are, of course, a million theories of what's going to happen, and depending on which business, different situations and different ways of targeting the post-COVID normal will have to be explored as well. But if none of the three options, then just stay there and hang in there. You have to stay motivated, stay focused, focus on your well-being, and also make sure people around you who believe in you, whether it's your investors, your stakeholders, also are positive, because it's important. Only if you're positive will you be able to give the confidence to your investors and your customers both. So just make sure that you are very positive.
Katyana, your comments on these?
Yeah, thank you. I basically share the same view as Lakshmi and Virginia, but I just would like to stress again that new opportunities are out there. It will be a lot more impact focused, and that we will be more focused on applying a lean approach, because I think COVID, as was mentioned before, COVID-19 is giving us a chance to re-strategize our businesses and making them more leaner, and it would be very beneficial for us to carry forward these leaner structures as we move into a time after COVID-19. And I think based on what Lakshmi just said, yes, stay positive, but also focus on your employees as well. Make sure that they're fine, make sure that they are healthy, make sure that they're feeling comfortable in the things they do, and that you protect them. And moreover, I think just to add another stakeholder here, again, back to the customers that we're looking at. So some of my companies that I'm working with actually have created a COVID response to, supporting their customers, whether it is making them aware of government initiatives to help them make the business survive, but also help them raise funds, through crowdfunding, or just to give them best practices, no matter what kind of industry that is. And I think this is a very crucial step in order to as well prepare the post-COVID relationships with your customers, because they will trust you and they will be more loyal going forward. And this is something that I have experienced and observed, which I actually really, really liked. And of course, the whole activity that you're actually looking in taking post-COVID already starts now. So I think that's just the small thing that I would like to add on top of what was already said.
Great. So fair bit of positives for entrepreneurs to kind of look up to, look forward to, and kind of think how they're going to kind of build their future strategies and future-proof their businesses. So that brings me to the last question of this panel. And earlier during the session itself, whether it is Lakshmi or Virginia, have touched upon companies like Alibaba coming out of the 2003 SARS epidemic, or someone like an Airbnb coming out of the subprime crisis of 2008. So to each one of you, if you were to pick that one industry or that one area where you could see a game changer emerging from the current crisis, and elaborate a little bit on that, not an existing company from your portfolio or someone that everyone would already be reading about, but if there was one area that you personally feel would be a game changer emerging from now or from here, what or which one would that be? So
Do I have to choose one? Can I have two?
Sure, you can go 3 if you want.
Okay. I think one of the industries I'm definitely keeping a close eye on is edtech. So education, right? We've edtech has been nascent in Southeast Asia because I'm in Singapore, right? So obviously in India you have Baiju and stuff, but in China, like edtech is crazy. Like there's so many edtech unicorns. Every couple of months you have a new edtech unicorn in China. But Southeast Asia, I think the time for edtech has come. And I'm starting. So I did my first edtech deal this week, but I'm actually looking much more closely into the region. I'm looking at places where I've never really looked before. So I think that's one. I think last couple of years telemedicine very hot, but actually one of the things that I think people know, you don't make money from telemedicine, right? You make money from the distribution of medicine, or the actual. I'm looking at the disruption of what I think of of the pharmaceutical industry, actually. The way we distribute drugs, and actually in the end the way we create drugs, because the truth is, in a pandemic like that, the rich countries are going to get the drug first, right? And then there's going to be a race, and then all kinds of inequalities are going to come out. So that's something interesting for me. And I think I talked about retail tech before, but actually another thing I'm really paying attention to is digital financial services. Again, financial stuff for the financial inclusion for the unbanked. People have been talking about this since Muhammad Yunus has been talking about this since the 70s. But actually, I think, like, even for a normal consumer like us, we can't go to the bank, right? You can, but like with a lot of difficulty. I'm starting to look at a lot of these verticals because I think not only just because they're necessary, but I also think that this will change the game for women as a whole. So when I talked about Teja Ventures before, we don't just actually our portfolio is 60% female, 40% male founders. So we invest regardless of whether you're a male or female founder, but we're looking at what you're doing, which has overall ecosystem impact, positive ecosystem impact for women, right? And one of the things we notice is that when you bring a lot of these things online, right? Because now you have to, actually women are disproportionate beneficiaries, because what was costly before, or the fact that they just had less access, or they were just turned away at the door of the bank, now you go online, it's an algorithm. Generally algorithms are not biased that way, at least not and I think the type of data that we're asking from our consumers is also different. And when you cut down costs and create and democratize access, you benefit women because they are the most unbanked. They're as an example. So I'm very excited about it. This is like, I feel like in many ways, this is a crazy thing to say, but all of a sudden Teja's thesis has become like a lot more real post-COVID. Now I go to investor, and it's not like they don't think it's like a niche thing. They know this is the truth. And I'm excited for it. I think disruption has been coming for a long time, but now one of the things that we're looking at, which we never looked at before, I don't think this is a vertical, but this is just something, is actually technology for SMEs. Because everybody thinks startups are so cool, right? But how about 96% of Asian businesses are SMEs. It's the backbone of our economy. What is the technology which can actually change the game for SMEs? And Southeast Asia is really much less digitalized in a place like China, which is what I'm used to, right? But I'm excited for it because, like I said, never waste a crisis.
Thank you. Tatiana?
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree, like with EdTech and with the telemedicine sectors that are gaining much more and more traction within as well also Africa. And especially during now the times that schools are closed, a lot of companies are actually popping up on the African continent that are trying to, educate the children within different education levels. But I would like to mention just one other thing, which is tech as an enabler for, as you say, like the industry, for example, of the unbanked, or agriculture, where technology has not been as present as in other type of industries, such as e-commerce, etc. So I mentioned that before in one of the other questions, that tech will be an enabler, but also I would like to highlight that, well, maybe the payment industry, that we're going to be moving more and more to digital payment and like a cashless economy as well, which basically impacts all of our other industries too, because I think, yeah, everyone knows that due to the spread of the virus, like people don't like to handle like the physical cash anymore, and therefore a lot of companies are as well showing up in order to make these transfers redundant and to actually provide the opportunity to do digital transfers. And the government is also doing a lot within the African countries. So for example, Kenya or Ghana, they are working with mobile money providers or digital payment platforms in order to, waive fees on payments, etc. I think that's just a logistical question that actually influences all the other industries that we're talking about as well, besides, not going into telemedicine again and the infrastructure around distribution of drugs. But really just wanted to mention that as well. In terms of the financial and fintech industries, I'm not really sure how this will play out, especially in terms of, working with the unbanked. We have a couple of startups that are also looking into that. But what I'm interested in seeing within the next couple of weeks is how, lending capacity will be influenced as well due to, like liquidity shortfalls, etc. But just that, maybe one of the other panelists can give me some insights on that.
Thank you. Lakshmi, the last one.
Next. So I think a couple of weeks ago, there was this interesting article. Philip Kotler has launched his book, and he talks about this whole anti-consumerism and how COVID is obviously made people think on multiple aspects. Many people have realized that a lot of stuff they own is no longer required. Many of us have been hoarding, and I say we, of course, I'm talking about people maybe in metros, the urban, and you've been a big driver of all this consumerism that's happened. So I also, believe that, anti-consumerism is going to be at least the theme for the immediate future, because we're also seeing the huge impact, everything has on climate. So there's like different groups of people he's talked about even within anti-consumerism. He's talked about those who are the hoarders who realize that they don't and they want to scale down and pare down, just owning stuff. And that's been a millennial trend, but I think that's going to now shift, and we're going to see a lot more people, really thinking twice, thrice about, just consuming stuff, whether it is any kind of ownership. And so this, I believe, will actually drive a reuse economy. So I just like how we saw the gig economy, shared economy emerge in 2008 as a necessity. I think this anti-consumerism might actually, trigger possibly a reuse economy. Like renting stuff, you're reusing stuff, neighborhood rentals, and these things will thrive a bit more. So that's one. And then, of course, he also talks about, how people have become more sensitive to be converting into, being more conscious eaters. They're going to eat less, be more conscious about vegans and vegetarians. So we've seen some of these industries already thrive or, see a lot of traction. Like there's a company called Beyond Meat in the US, which has gone on to become huge. In fact, KFC, McDonald's are all serving Beyond Meat burgers now. So I think some of that trend might also start, percolating to a larger audience, which wasn't so receptive in the past to mock meat and stuff like that. So that's another industry of alternative vegan, vegetarian food. Maybe India necessarily doesn't relate so much to, a lot of alternative vegetarian, but I believe like people who've been non-vegetarians, which are still 60-65% of the population, might look at alternatives. So that's the other industry. And this whole office automation and like, Virginia mentioned, 96% are SMEs. And so all of these have never really thought about virtual working, remote working. So this is going to drive a whole need for virtual working, security tools, while, the usual suspects have always been catering to the large audience. Technology that will cater, to smaller companies to work remotely with a lot of the safety measures in place, VPN equivalents, but catering to the SMEs, for example, and more automation tools. That's another sector which hadn't probably been recognized as a sector, might emerge as a sector in my view. And lastly, I think the freelance economy, again, a lot of it has been largely driven by need for freelance. For example, a lot of women who tend to stay at home, they kind of become big consumers of freelance economy. And I think in the next decade, this freelance economy is going to see a bigger takeoff, because again, people have started evaluating a lot of things that they've been doing out of need, or just to keep up with the Joneses, and so many of these things are going to drive them to make more educated decisions and choices which prioritize what's really important for them. And so that will help them rejig how they want to work. And virtual working, of course, has been established as something that can be done. So this is another change that I see, the freelance economy, which is not talked about as much, although it has been in existence. I think that will see another big boom. And digital fitness, which has 100% picked up only because of COVID. It didn't exist. It existed in just spurts using Skype and some of the digital video tools. But I think now people have realized digital fitness is something that can be done. So I see this as an industry that will take off. May not be necessarily huge in terms of billions of dollars, but I think this industry has good potential.
Can I just add something, because you talked about digital fitness? So there is an Indian company which I think raised 400 million recently on digital fitness. I think they call CureFit.
CureFit.
Yeah. I think
they pivoted to digital only post-COVID. They weren't digital before.
Interesting. I think I met them 2 years ago. Well, should have invested then, should I? but I
they were very capex heavy till COVID.
Yeah. I remember that. I met them 2 years ago when they were much smaller. And actually, I just wanted to pick up on one point that you said. You talked about remote work, freelance economy. So one of our startups, Indian startups actually, women-led, is a company called Shiros. You guys might actually know it. And during this time, a huge revenue stream for them is remote work. So it's and they're onboarding tons and tons of clients. And all the women are basically filling those roles. So for me, it's like I said, in the past, a socially good thing. Now is
correct. And I'm very happy to see these changes.
Me too. I'm super happy. I mean, and the rural commerce company I talked about, also women led. So
yeah.
So it's I guess our time has come, right? It's now. It's not our time is coming. Our time has come. So yeah, it's super cool actually. Hopefully some good will come out of this, because I think still a lot of uncertainty, but hopefully I think the world is being forced to change now. Yeah.
Great. So with that, we come to the close of this particular topic. We have had amazing comments from 3 amazing women leaders, entrepreneurs, investors, ecosystem builders, however you put it. And thank you so much for taking time. We truly, we're talking of global, and we have one panelist dialing in from Singapore, one covering Africa but dialing in from Germany, and one from India. So we truly have had a global panel here. So thank you so much for taking time and sharing your views and thoughts with the audience. With that, I'd like to hand it over back to Kanish. Over to you.
Ajay, can I say one last thing?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Just because we're all female entrepreneurs, and because we're about to launch She Loves Tech, we just confirmed India this year, like today. So because we're about to launch She Loves Tech in 30 countries in about a month. So it's not really a plug, but I mean, everybody here is welcome to sign up and join. Very exciting for us. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Virginia. Over to you, Kanish.
Sure. Thank you, Ajay. So next we have 3 startups coming in for their showcase. So we'll begin in the next 5 minutes or so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajay.
Thank you.
Having me
Thank you.
Virginia, and